Do you think cutting off food, water and electricity is within international law?
I think that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself against terrorism.
That's not the question I asked.
It is an answer to the question that you've asked, and I think it's an appropriate one at this time.
As a Jewish person, I was drawn to law and the rule of law and the importance of protection of human rights because of my own and my family's experience, and not least knowing that the great human rights protections and the laws of war were in very large part codified and brought to the fore because of the experiences of the Holocaust. And that is ingrained in the DNA of certainly of my generation.
We have prescribed Hamas. We have prescribed Hezbollah. Prime Minister, why don't we put the UK's... Prime Minister, why don't we put the UK's national security first by now prescribing the IRGC?
So, new Prime Minister of UK, Keir Starmer, has surprised everybody by his one appointment. Most of the cabinet members have been appointed along the expected lines. They were the people who were part of the shadow cabinet of Keir Starmer, and they almost got the job that they were responsible for in the shadow cabinet when the Labour Party was in the opposition. Except one person whose omission has surprised everybody, and that person is Emily Thornberry. You remember Emily Thornberry shamelessly defending Israel's right to defend even at the cost of committing genocide in Gaza? And she was defending that line not just in one interview but on several interviews. Most notably this interview on Newsnight with Victoria Derbyshire.
But I mean, I don't know.
They've already cut off the food.
I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is
that against international law? It's really simple. Sir Keir Starmer doesn't seem to think it is.
What is simple is that whatever actions are taken by a democracy, it has to be done in accordance with international law. And we have heard tonight from the President of the United States that he has been on the phone to Netanyahu, and both of them have agreed that democracies need to act in accordance with international law.
Pause there, if I may. Do you think cutting off food, water and electricity is within international law?
I think that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself against terrorism.
That's not the question I asked.
It is an answer to the question that you've asked, and I think it's an appropriate one at this time.
You remember, Victoria kept on praising her and she kept on defending. Why? Because she thought this is exactly the line, this is exactly the word that her then boss Keir Starmer would like to hear, because Keir Starmer himself was in the line of fire because of his interview on LBC, where he had said that yes, Israel has the right to cut off the water supply, the fuel supply, electric supply and food supply to Gaza, and for which the guy had to face global condemnation. And that is exactly what prompted millions of Muslims up and down the country to boycott Labour Party in this election. And a lot of Labour candidates had to pay the price for that boycott. Now, since then, while Keir Starmer's stance has changed, Labour Party's overall stance has changed, Emily Thornberry, unfortunately, has had to pay the price, and she is not the Attorney General because she was the shadow Attorney General. But now she is without a job in the cabinet. Who is the new Attorney General? That is very, very interesting. His name is Richard Hermer. Richard Hermer, he is quite a known lawyer in this country. He's been advising the Labour Party for the last several years. Now he has been appointed as the new Attorney General of this country. That means he is the eyes and ears of the government as far as the legal matters are concerned. So he oversees the legal department, he oversees the serious fraud office, and he also oversees the functioning of Crown Prosecution Service, whose head was none other than Keir Starmer between 2008 and 2011. Quite interesting. But that is not the interesting part of his appointment. The interesting part of his appointment is that he has been known for his views against Israel. Yes, you heard it right. He's been known. Let me take you through key development where he was involved with his anti-Israeli views. Now, I'm not saying that this is a radical, this is going to spark off a radical shift in Keir Starmer's views on Israel. I'm not going to say that. It might happen, it might not happen. What I'm saying is that it's a very, very interesting development. And you will understand why. Because in October, right in the immediate aftermath of the Israel's brutal genocidal campaign in Gaza, Richard Hermer was one of the 8 senior Jewish lawyers in this country who wrote saying that Israel's actions may be in breach of international laws. In fact, Richard Hermer was asked as to why you decided to write a letter along with other 7 Jewish lawyers against Israel in the aftermath of the 7th of October attacks and Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. He appeared on LBC and he explained, and he makes a very profound case. What he says is that his personal journey as somebody whose ancestors were victims of Holocaust have been quite a driving force for him to become a lawyer in the first place. And therefore, it does have its impact on his actions. And that was one of the reasons why he decided to become the co-signatory.
I think we all felt that there are times in which our values as lawyers and in which our values as Jews come together. And that sometimes, although it's much more comfortable not to say something, that we had an obligation both as lawyers and Jews to stand up and say what we feel. And there are 2 things flowing from that, Sangeeta, that I think certainly I can say, speaking for myself. I mean, the first is that as a Jewish person, I was drawn to law and the rule of law and the importance of protection of human rights because of my own and my family's experience, and not least knowing that the great human rights protections and the laws of war were in very large part codified and brought to the fore because of the experiences of the Holocaust. And that is ingrained in the DNA of certainly of my generation. And so promoting those in these incredibly difficult and sensitive times, I think, was important to us all. And the other important thing is I think we recognised then, and it's even more the case 2 weeks on, that this is a debate that suffers from people finding themselves in silos, some sort of zero-sum game, that you can only be for one side or for the other, that you can only recognise the suffering of one side and not the other. And that is a really dangerous and really unhelpful path. And what we wanted to say was, look, both law and morality give you a way through here to understand the conflict, to govern it. And underpinning it all, I kind of end with where I started, is the great importance of respecting human life, human dignity, whoever is suffering, whoever that individual is.
Another example is that not too long ago, last year, when the Rishi Sunak government tried to bring the bill to declare BDS, which is boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel and Israeli products, illegal, he was one of the main voices who advised the Labour Party under Keir Starmer to oppose this bill. Because he said that banning BDS would have a crippling impact on the free speech in this country. That was another example when he opposed the banning of BDS. BDS primarily targets Israel and Israeli products. You must have seen lots of campaigns, lots of calls for boycotting of Israeli products. They have been done under the banner of the BDS, and Israel is really, really worried. Anybody who backs Israel has been opposed to the BDS because they know the kind of impact that the BDS is having on the overall business interest of Israel. In 2011, Richard Hermer wrote a chapter in a book titled Corporate Complicity in Israel's Occupation, Evidence from the London session of the Russell Tribunal on Palestine. Now, why is it important? Because right now, as we know, that there has been a call for the boycott of key products, including, the Starbucks and the McDonald's and Johnson and Johnson and Zara and whatnot. There are many, many brands that I myself have been boycotting, and a lot of other people have been boycotting, particularly in the aftermath of the Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza, because these brands have been directly or indirectly involved with the Israel's genocidal regime. So, in light of this, the chapter that he wrote in 2011 on the role of corporates and the complicity with the Israel's rogue regime is very, very important. It's quite a marked departure from the person who would have been appointed in this role if it wasn't for Richard Hermer. Just imagine Emily Thornberry in this role today, or even Suella Braverman, before being appointed as the Home Secretary twice. She was the Attorney General of this country. She was the legal advisor, chief legal advisor of this country. And we have seen her conduct and her stance on Israel. Not too long ago, when Israel was breaking international law by attacking a diplomatic mission, Iranian diplomatic mission in Syria, and that almost created a regional war, this lady, who is a lawyer herself and has been Attorney General in the past, was defending Israel in the parliament and asking the then Sunak government to declare Iranian army as a terrorist organization. I'm not making it up. Watch it.
2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, I was in Israel at the northern border with Lebanon. And of course, we've all seen what happened this weekend. But since October the 7th, Iran-backed Hezbollah has fired over 4,000 rockets into northern Israel, displacing over 150,000 Israeli civilians. I met some of those families. They're under siege, they've been uprooted, but they are brave and defiant in the face of terrorism and anti-Semitism. Mr. Speaker, we have known for years that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is the world's chief sponsor of terrorism, funding and promoting terrorist plots, radicalisation and hostage-taking, both in the Middle East and at home. Mr. Speaker, we have proscribed Hamas. We have proscribed Hezbollah. Prime Minister, why don't we put the UK's... Prime Minister, why don't we put the UK's national security first by now prescribing the IRGC?
Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady knows, that we don't comment on any potential prescription decisions, but of course we recognise the threat from Iran and have taken measures to counter it at home and around the world. I obviously refer her to my previous answer, but I'm confident the police, security services and courts all have the tools that they need to sanction, prosecute and mitigate the threats from Iran. We strengthened our sanctions regime recently, and including sanctioning the IRGC in its entirety.
So if you look at it, whichever way you look at it, you think that his appointment, Richard Hermer's appointment, is very, very interesting. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.